And in today's episode, we're going to do a deep dive into how to figure out which teams 25, even potentially 26 firsts you want to bet against using a super great tool at dynasty-daddy.com. Not a sponsor or anything, just the best free tool that we have found. Stick around to figure out how to get an edge on all your league mates.
Locked on target.
And welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. I'm your host, Justin, joined by just David here today. We wanted to get together to create this short episode and dive in to figure out which team's future first you should be targeting. We're going to use dynasty-daddy.com. That is dynasty-daddy.com. Information in the episode description, wherever you are listening or viewing.
Yeah, this is a great tool, and if you've listened to any of our previous podcasts, chances are they've come up. We like to use their trade database to come up with some real trades to talk about. We find it a little bit more useful than just creating our own hypothetical deals. We do that some too, but it's really nice to have a basis of trades to go off of. And that's just one of their many tools. Today, we're going to be looking at the power rankings tool that they offer. Kind of breaks down a league based on not only team value, but you can do it from a productive or production standpoint as well. We'll kind of dive into that.
If you are watching or following along somewhere, there's a video. That's great. If not, we're going to try to walk through orally a little bit as well for you podcast viewers. So when you go to dynastydaddy.com, just go ahead. If it starts on this Patreon link, for example, you just click, of course, the sleeper icon. You can also pull up ESPN, Yahoo if you're weird. We like to use sleeper. No shame if you use somewhere else, I guess. You type in, of course, the username. We're doing a league from our friend Grubby Paws. We're in a league or two with him. So you type in the username, select year 2024, should already be set. You just press sign in, and it tells you how many leagues this player is in. They're in 12 leagues, and they wanted us to evaluate the league Dynasty. So we click this drop-down icon, select a league, select Dynasty, and we click power rankings.
So, and real quick, I don't know if you noticed, but neither of us are Grubby Paws, and we're just able to log in. So if you ever like join a new league or pick up an orphan or something, you don't know the managers, this is a good way to do a little scouting on how they might like to run their teams. So you maybe can figure out who you can target to get picks from.
Absolutely. I do a dive whenever I do a startup on all 11 other managers, kind of figure out how many leagues are they in. I mean, if someone's in 25 leagues, they're probably pretty experienced, right? So you can even get an idea, is this person only in 2 leagues? Amazing, fun tool. You see this power ranking screen here. So it starts out where you can select trade value. So you can see all assets. It tells you draft capital, tight ends, wide receivers, RBs, QBs, and teams are sorted by this. You can also look at a contender view. So that's very interesting. We like to look at both of them because teams can use those trade chips, the future picks, to become contenders. When you click Fantasy Market here, you can select ADP Daddy. That's just them pulling from Sleeper ADP and other draft sources ADP using an API just to pull from it. Keep, Trade, Cut, Dynasty Process, Fantasy Navigator, Pro Football Network. Also, there are redraft ranks you can use. You could even import your own rankings if you're nasty. I haven't gotten around to that yet, and you see it sorts every team. You can sort by everything: overall rank, starter rank, QB rank, RB rank, wide receiver rank, tight end rank, draft rank, and they even group people by contenders where they can be a super team, a contender, frisky, rebuilding, or trust the process. So it's like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in how good they are deemed to be as far as the ability to contend right now. So this is an amazing overview of a league.
I have a team that's called a fraud. What does that mean? I'm a little concerned.
So a fraud is a team. I guess I missed fraud teams as well. It's kind of what it sounds like, right? It's somewhere between frisky and rebuilding. It's a team that looks like it could compete on paper, is what they're kind of saying based on the assets, but in theory is a good team to potentially target as well. That team you're talking about, though, I believe you are a little bit more of a trust the process team.
Yeah, I'm actually rebuilding there, so I think that's okay because that means that the bone structure is in place. I just need to fill in some holes, hopefully by next year.
I know you'll manage to do it. No stress there. David, I know you have a little bit of an overview on how you like to go through this. Can you walk us through how you kind of look at the league in general when trying to figure out what teams to target?
Yeah, first thing I do want to say is There's a lot of time between now and the 2025 draft order being set. Time for luck to take over via trades or injury or whatever. So I don't recommend being overconfident in any evaluation. I don't really like to buy first when the owner is selling them as an early first. Typically, they're going to have a plan in mind. So just don't overpay for it. And to be honest, most of these are going to end up as mid, but we'll kind of go through our process on how we get there. And then that kind of reverse side of that, I don't recommend selling your first as a late first unless it's like mid season and it's very clearly going to be a late first. But at this point in the process, sell it as a mid if it's yours. Don't buy it as an early is kind of what I go by in general. Looking at the league overall, I like to target teams with bad quarterback rooms. I like to target teams with limited draft capital. And one thing with Dynasty Daddy is they do a sum of all of the players on the roster. So they don't care about roster construction, which, I mean, you have to make these decisions when you're building this tool. So I understand why they did it, but I recommend clicking on, like, if you just click on a team, you'll see the roster pop up and you can see, okay, he's got what, the number 2 running back room, right? So you can look at the running back room and you see, okay, it's actually a pretty good running back room. So that's pretty accurate. And when we look through this league, I couldn't actually find a great example, but I've seen it in several other leagues where like the number 1 wide receiver room has no studs, but it's just so deep that it ends up getting the most value. So just do the extra step of looking at the roster once you think you've found someone that fits the rankings that you're looking for.
And so when we just look at this league here, again, we said we see contender teams, frisky teams, and rebuilding teams in this specific league. If you go to dynasty-daddy.com and you type in Grubby Paws, you can actually check out our Homeboys League and look at this as well. So any team down here in rebuilding, I'm not going to lie to you, I probably want to target their first. We're going to assume they don't want to trade their firsts. I would still double check and make sure their team actually looks bad. When I look at their teams here, they probably do actually look kind of on the worse end of things. Those look like teams we'd be willing to bet against. They don't have very many assets to make changes with. You still want to vet them using the same process we're going to look at the other teams in, but a rebuilding team or a trust the process team, if you can con them into thinking, if they believe that they are competing, of course you want to try to get them, unless somehow keep trade cut rankings just don't paint the picture. Still vet the team how we're going to teach you. And similar thing for the contenders. Usually you don't want to bet against the contenders, but still look at their roster, right? Are they actually more of a fraud? Is the market incorrect in your opinion? If you feel confident that these players they have are about to fall off a cliff, you can make that bet. So don't be afraid to make a bet as long as you're not paying a early first price. Or if they're a contender, if you can say, hey, look, you have the number 1 starter ranks. I'm buying this as the 111 or 112. You're going to have a guaranteed buy. Then it's also okay because you're buying at the worst possible outcome. So that's kind of a little bit of a process and how you can handle that. So with that being said, and we've talked through a lot of the general strategy ideas, David, you said you like to look at a bad QB room. I have a bad QB room, the 11th ranked QB room on a frisky roster here pulled up, the team Anthony 2478. Walk through a little bit about how you would evaluate if you're interested in acquiring this team's 25 first at a mid first price.
Yeah, so what, this league is start 10, correct?
Start 10, full PPR, and Superflex.
So kind of start with how many players would I feel comfortable starting. So Lawrence and Rogers, Hall, Pacheco, Rashad White, maybe Trey Benson. I guess if you really blur your eyes a little bit. It's got a solid receiver room, but it's not very deep and there's no real stud. I mean, we expect Marv to be one, but is he going to be in his rookie season? We'll find out. But there's a lot of unknown there. That's another thing is lean into the unknown when you're trying to bet on future first. It could go the wrong way, but it could also go in your favor. Just the more volatility there is to a roster, the better. Look at the tight end room. There's basically nothing there. Schultz is someone you're going to have to start. If Andrews gets hurt, yeah, you're happy to have Likely, but if he's not hurt, then Likely is useless. He does have both of his first in 25 and 26. We did not find a person in this league who does not have their 26 but has their 25. That's a good target right there if you can find that, because then they would have no first over the next 2 years, and that limits their flexibility to patch holes significantly. This roster is a little heavy at the running back position. There's not much depth at quarterback. There's nothing at tight end, and the receiving room has some depth, but it's mostly meh. So this is kind of a team that I would like to bet against. Brees Hall gets hurt for an extended period of time, not wishing that on him, but if that happens, this team looks a lot worse.
And this is a team that the starter rank is ranked as fourth overall. However, we don't really see very much depth. We see a wide receiver room where the wide receiver three is Watson, and they have Dubs, Judy, Corley, Elijah Moore, Traylon Burks. I mean, they don't have a wide receiver three that I feel comfortable starting on any of my teams. I think this is definitely a weak wide receiver room. They're probably going to try to acquire a wide receiver with your 25 first, would be my best guess. So like this is the type of team that I would love to trade a average wide receiver for their 25 first. I'm thinking about a guy that I don't necessarily believe in their prospects for this year. I mean, obviously if I could sell a veteran, a Stephon Diggs type, I'd be ecstatic to do that. But then if we look at more of a kind of middling tier of wide receivers, we're thinking guys in the range that people like, a Nico Collins, a Tank Dell type, guys like George Pickens. Find out if they're high on any guy in your roster. There is a world in which you lose that deal where that wide receiver hits a outcome that helps this team make the playoffs.
There's some good players here, and you're absolutely right. It could go against you, but this is the game we play. There's nothing. There's no way you're gonna have a perfect prediction. So just kind of lean into it a little, like I said.
You just want to make sure that the player you're trading away is a mid first value because this team probably is going to wind up as a mid first. In fact, most teams wind up as a mid first, right? Somewhere between 5 and 8 or 9, right? That kind of range there. Looking at another one here, I'm going to have David read kind of the players that we have on this team. This is another frisky one with a bad QB room. David, if you can give the quick overview, and then I will talk briefly on this one.
Yeah, the quarterback room is probably the biggest question mark outside of the tight end room, which we'll get to in a second. Jordan Love is what we think he is. That's solid QB1. JJ McCarthy's in a good situation, but he's a rookie quarterback who might not even be starting week one. And then there's nothing. So if JJ McCarthy's not starting week one, you're rolling with one quarterback until he starts starting. So that's a bit of an unknown, and that's something good to look for. Then you continue Christian McCaffrey. He's kind of a cheat code. He's going to get you points whether you want him or not. Got some other running backs that you can plug in, some decent depth there. I would probably try to trade maybe Pollard or Connor if I was this manager. That's not the point of this video. Wide receiver room, I like. It's got Jamar Chase, another great player, another top end player. Garrett Wilson's solid, but then a bunch of question marks after that. Xavier Leggett's your receiver 3. Quentin Johnson is receiver 4 on value here. So really there's not even a receiver 3. It's even worse than the last one we looked at. But again, you do have a hammer at the top. This guy needs a lot to go right for him, but if Love, McCaffrey, or Chase get injured, this roster could definitely tailspin.
If you look at this roster here, he needs two things, right? He needs more wide receiver. He needs more QB. For example, if our friend Grubby Paws wanted to make a bet against this guy, it's hard for Grubby Paws to do this because he is not super loaded at the wide receiver or quarterback position. Grubby Paws being a contender, having what he has, I'd probably be willing to see, can I offer Cooper Kupp and Khalil Shakir with some hype? And can I aim for this team's 25 first and just bet on the variance at his QB room, the wide receiver depth not being great? You could also try to offer Kirk Cousins for his 25 first since he has JJ McCarthy, who may not be starting, and since Grubby Paws has two QBs. So just going over what Grubby Paws could do potentially. But you look at what their weakness is and you try to bet against it because you need to fill a need of theirs. What you're betting on is that weakness is not strong enough with the addition that you give them for them to overcome just the variance of a dynasty fantasy football season.
And I would start with the receivers there too, because one of the big things that I see with this roster is shorting them at quarterback. If McCarthy doesn't start from week one and he doesn't have anyone else to fill in that spot, that's a big negative. So if you trade him Cousins, it fills that hole, which, like you said, you do have to fill a need to get that 25 first. I would start at receiver.
Yep, I would love that Cooper Cup, or if you could build a Chris Godwin plus a Javon Baker for the 25 first, I'd be ecstatic to do that. So obviously wide receiver, like David said, a better need to fill because if you leave a void at QB, you are so excited. And we are going to look at top team here in the rebuilding section. This team says it is frisky. We have Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, and then some backup quarterbacks. Aiden O'Connell could be a potential starter. At running back, they have Saquon, Najee, Corum, Johnson, and then some backups. Wide receivers, Pity City, T. Higgins, Xavier Worthy, Jaden Reeds, Mike Evans, DeAndre Hopkins, Josh Downs, and some other bodies. And they have TJ Hawkinson and Cole Kmet at tight end. But this team has 4 25 and 26 firsts, 4 25 and 26 seconds. So, David, when you see this, even though it says it's frisky, tell me what you are thinking when you see a team with this many future assets.
Yeah, I think this is one where if you know this manager and his tendencies, that really helps. But look, there's a solid QB room. You got two really good high end starters. You've got a nice starting running back room. No studs at receiver necessarily, but you've got enough depth there that you figure you can score a lot of points. Tight end room's basically how I'd want to build it. And sure, if Hawkinson stays out a little bit of this season, that kind of affects things. You can start Komet just fine. And then all of that draft capital. And he's like the AJB manager away from, trying to trade AJB for a first and something else. He gets that deal done, and then all of a sudden this roster is a title contender. I'm not trying to get his 25 first, unless the deal is right, because obviously he still needs some things to go right for him to make that nut outcome of a title contender. But man, this roster looks a little better than the other frisky ones we've looked at, in my opinion.
Yeah, that is the type of roster you buy as the 111 or 112. You say you have a solid QB room. Saquon is going to be a hammer. Najee Harris just got a offensive coordinator upgrade. Michael Pittman's getting the best quarterback he's ever played with back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sell him on the narrative if he's looking to fill a need, and tell him his first is going to be a late first. Let's just fire away one more frisky team that we just want to look over. This process of how we evaluate them is the same that you would do for any other team as well. So we're going to look at this one that doesn't have any red in the rankings at all. It's kind of mid throughout. 4, 5, 9, 5, 5, 2, 4 at the different positions.
Kind of just taking a look at the starters. Like I said, that's just typically the first thing I'm going to do. Probably a little short on depth, but there is high end talent. The quarterback room has some question marks. You can see it going either way. Goff, Geno, Nix could be enough to carry you. They could also do poorly enough that they're not going to get you there. You do have Howell to back up Geno in case they make that switch. Then you look at the running back room and you've got Kenneth Walker, and if Nick Chubb's healthy, you've got Nick Chubb. After that, you don't really have much that's guaranteed as far as production. Justin Jefferson, you love to have. Jalen Waddle's a good player. Mari Cooper's going to score points, probably Hollywood Brown, maybe Curtis Samuel, but then you've got some question marks in Ricky Pearsall, Marvin Mims. Love the tight end room. How could you not? No tight end premium though, correct?
No tight end premium, but you still got to like.
You're still probably going to start both of them a lot of weeks with this roster, but if there's a tight end premium, I'd feel a lot better about this roster.
And for our podcast, that is Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts in his tight end room.
So, this roster is what I would qualify as a mid first. It could go either way. They could end up as a title contender by the end of the season. They could also end up in the early first. So it really is just a true gamble here if you're going to target this first.
It absolutely is a true gamble here. I agree with that as well. I like to bet against the quarterback room, having Sam Howell with Geno Smith. That does make it a little bit less risky, but I view it as 3 QB2s and 3s. I personally would be very interested in trying to bet against this if I was him. If I could just package some running backs to this guy. I view this team as a potentially running back needy team. Nick Chubb is injured. He has only the Seattle running backs that you know are going to be starting at the beginning of the season. You don't want to start 2 on 1 team. I'd be trying to sell him running backs for a first. I wouldn't want to necessarily give up Kyron, though, since Grubby Paws is a contender. But I might not be opposed to it if the right deal was back, if I could get back like even a Nick Chubb and give a little bit of something like a Jaleel McLaughlin back. But this is definitely a team we talked about a little bit as we were looking over it. This is a really variance dependent team, like you said. If somehow Bo Nix sucks and one of his other 2 quarterbacks, would have to be Jared Goff, gets injured, this quarterback room could tank him. His running back room could tank him. But again, his wide receiver room and tight end room could also carry him. So, true gamble. Those are a lot of the times the ones you have to make. If you have the ability, if you're a rebuilding team and you can bet against 2 or 3 true gamble teams, the honest truth is you're probably going to wind up with like the 103 and 104, the 106 or 107, and then the third one will be like the 109 or 110. So you'll get one that kind of goes a little bit below where you want it to be, and it's like a higher pick, one that's right in the middle, which is what you expect, and one that kind of hits. You get better at it over time by doing this. And of course, the closer to the season you get when rosters shape up more, you know more information, of course. One other thing, David, how do you evaluate this when you're targeting a 26 first? Let's go ahead and just look at the top contender teams, and let's look at this one right here, for example. Would you be more interested in targeting the 26 first or the 25 first of this team?
So we've got A Rich, Jaden Daniels, Baker Mayfield, Daniel Jones at quarterback, a couple other bench players. Jameer Gibbs, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Ramondre, Kendre Miller, Raheem Mostert. Pretty deep running back room. And Ayuk, Devonta Smith, DJ Moore, Lad McConkey, Deontay Johnson, Rashee Rice. Pretty solid wide receiver room. And then Mark Andrews, Pat Fryermuth. I'll be honest, I don't know if I'm betting against this team for a couple of years. They've got a young quarterback room that could blossom. It could also end up sucking, so I get that. You've got two potential cheat code quarterbacks, and they're both young. You've got Jameer Gibbs. Probably use a stud at wide receiver, to be honest, but the room there is still pretty good from my view. I don't see them aging out over the next 2 years, and they still have enough flexibility that I wouldn't want to bet on this year's team going down. So, like, I'm not going to say no if they come asking for 25, 26 first, because I'll always buy them. Like you mentioned, the more you have, the better chances that one of them hits the high outcome. But yeah, this one I would definitely be pitching to the manager like, dude, this is a late first for sure.
Absolutely. We didn't vet that one ahead of time. Just wanted to throw one of the top two teams to you. I agree with you on that analysis entirely. That's the other thing, too, that you really have to keep in mind when doing this. Some teams you don't want to bet against. You don't usually want to bet against my teams, for example, or David's teams, because if we sell you our first, we got a plan. Usually, if I sell somebody my first, I literally have an inbox offer I'm ready to accept as soon as I trade my first away to make an additional win now move. Like I'm not going to lie, I literally will bang bang two trades at once so that they don't know what's hitting them. Just know your league as well. Like David had mentioned earlier, knowing your league mates' tendencies. If you know it's a very sharp manager in general, don't bet against a sharp manager's first unless you're buying it as the 110, 11, 12 type of price, something that you would expect to be fair value for a late first. David, are we missing anything, or do you think we've wrapped up a general idea of how to use this tool? Any finishing thoughts?
I guess we kind of touched on how to target a 26 first, and then we didn't find the best example. The things I look for are aging teams. You want veterans that if they fall off the cliff, the depth does not look very good. We could pull up my team in Dynasty Degens, to be honest. You want limited flexibility, so missing a first, this year or next year. Some older receivers or running backs, just guys that you expect to lose value. If you've got a good manager of that squad, like you're about to pull up my team. This team walked through the regular season last year. It was a fun team to have last year, but we came up just a little short. I do have Allen and Hurts, which is great. Cousins about to fall off, we assume, in value. Running back room, DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, Gus Bus. Like there's a lot of age there. Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, even TJ Hawkinson with his injury, and then I don't have a 25 first. If the manager of this team came trying to buy something with their 26 first, I'd be pretty interested. Allen and Hurts maybe gives me a little concern, but there's a lot of assets there that are aging, and I'm a little nervous about this team going into 2025.
And this is also a start 11 league, so you need more depth. And when there's this many pieces that could age out, the more starters there are in a league in general, I think the more we're willing to bet against average teams or bet that variance will hit a team, just because there is so much more variability when you need to start 11 or 12 or even more players. So a lot easier for things to go wrong. In fact, in this league last year, I was third most in max points for and missed the playoffs, and I hate everything.
Your roster from last year would have been a good example of how bad luck can take a roster that you don't think will give you a high first. And then what were you, like 106 maybe, 107?
106.
So someone bought your first maybe as a late first and then ended up getting the 106. It's not a huge home run. But man, if you buy it as the 109, 110 and you get it the 106, that's a good jump in value.
It absolutely was for that guy who bought my first. What can you do about it? So, if you guys have questions about any leagues, any evaluations, feel free to leave some information in the comments below about, like, perhaps a team that you are thinking about targeting. You could even share the URL to that team's sleeper logo or sleeper roster. That is always available on your phone. It's right below the team name on Sleeper. You can share a little URL. We're happy to even look at a team and tell you honestly, like, yeah, we'd be willing to bet against this team. Make sure to tell us what picks they have as well. Ask any questions you have, clarify anything, we will reply. We think that this is one of the easiest ways to possibly get a head up on your opponents. I've wound up with 101s from doing this type of stuff. In fact, next year I'm going to have a few 101s from doing this last year.
Yeah, you don't even have to see the season to play out in one of them. I already know which one that is too.
The thing is, you need to have at least one quarterback in a super flex. Pro tip, by the way. I don't know if we've mentioned that in any of our videos, but have at least one quarterback in a super flex.
I was bummed the day that trade went through because I was trying to get that first too.
That was fun. So, from all of us here at the Dino Construction Podcast, we hope you found this as useful to you as it was for us. Please make sure to like and subscribe wherever you view. And from all of us here, until next time.